y'all, welcome to my channel Maker Magic with Meg Epps. I am so excited to be doing this first YouTube tutorial. I'm super nervous but super excited also. So for the first tutorial, we're kind of already in that Halloween fall stage, and I definitely wanted to do something because I'm totally obsessed with Pastel Halloween. So I wanted that to be like my theme. So what we are going to be creating is a 10-ounce Stubby Ghosty Babe tumbler. So I hope you guys enjoy this tutorial, and let's get right into it. We're starting off with a 10-ounce Stubby tumbler from Craft Haven Tumblers. I'm starting with a step that I think is important. Some people don't do this step, totally up to you though. I do it because I feel like it ensures a longer shelf life. And one tip I learned early on in tumbler making was about sanding. I always wondered if I had sanded long enough. Like, how do you know? How do you know when you've sanded enough? Well, the tip that I learned was if you smell that stainless steel, that's when you've sanded enough. After that, I'm going to go in with some 90% rubbing alcohol. If you skip the sanding step, please don't skip this step. It's important that you wipe your tumbler down with rubbing alcohol so that you remove all the dirt, but also so that you remove any oils that are on this tumbler from people's hands that have handled the tumbler before it got in your hands, and also from your hands. So if you don't do this, your epoxy could totally repel from that oil on your tumbler from somebody's hands. So I believe that it's a very important step. Next, I'll be going in with Counterculture's Pop of Color paints to give my tumbler a base coat. I'll also be using one of Counterculture's paintbrushes, and if you guys have not used one of these paintbrushes yet, it's a 10 out of 10. Like, I totally recommend this paintbrush. It is like working with a dream. So one good thing about Pop of Color paint is the coverage is great. I don't have to go in heavy-handed with my paint application, nor do I have to do a lot of layers. So I'm just going to go around and paint the entire surface of the tumbler, making sure no stainless steel is showing through the white. I make sure I get my bottoms and my rim, and I just really make sure this application is full coverage. I don't want any of that stainless steel showing through. We will be going over this with a white glitter, so that's important that none of that stainless steel peeks through that white. Another great thing about Pop of Color paints is the dry time is extremely fast. So I'll be able to set my tumbler aside and let it dry while I'm prepping and mixing up my epoxy. If you want to speed up the dry time, you can totally go ahead and use a heat gun. Now that my tumbler is dry and my epoxy is mixed up, I can apply my glitter. I'll be using the epoxy method to apply my glitter, so I mixed up about 10 mLs of epoxy. That is well over the amount that we're gonna need, but I like to over measure. One of the worst things I find when I'm working is having to mix up more epoxy right in the middle of something. It's the worst. So I always like to over measure, but also because I'm going to be adding a little bit of a heavier coat than I normally would. This is because I'm going to be using two different glitters, and I want to be able to layer them. So by applying this thicker coat of epoxy will allow me to be able to layer those glitters. So I'm just smoothing my epoxy around the tumbler, making sure I'm covering the entire surface. Now the fun part, glittering. I'll be using my pure white glitter combo that's kind of like my secret white that I use when I want a pure white glitter tumbler. The glitters I use are from Pink and Purple Monkey. They are single pearl and French cotton. So I start off with single pearl, sprinkling that on my tumbler. Single pearl is a pearlescent matty glitter that is a pure white. And even though that it's matty, it still has this really pretty shimmer to it. But to add just a little bit of bling, I go right over top of that with the French cotton. French cotton is also a white glitter, but it has a little bit of silver in it to give it a little bit of extra sparkle. It's a very faint silver, so it doesn't take over the white. I layered these two glitters a few times, doing the same thing, sprinkling the single pearl first and then the French cotton. After I've done and layered the glitter, I allow my cup to cure before going in with a clear top coat of epoxy. I add a clear layer of epoxy, making sure that my tumbler is completely smooth and ready for the next part of the tutorial, which is applying vinyl. So it's very important that your tumbler is completely smooth. You may have to do multiple layers of epoxy, but I do a flood coat using Counterculture's medium viscosity, and I get a smooth finish every time. You will also need to cut out your little ghosty babes with your vinyl cutter. I use a Cricut. I will have the SVG I used link in the description of the video, along with all the other products I'm using. So you want to weed out your ghosts, leaving just the center of the ghost. So remove the outline and the faces. After you've weeded your ghost and prepared your tumbler with a smooth epoxy coat, we can start our peekaboo technique. Start applying your ghosty babes to your tumbler. I want them to be staggered around the tumbler, but I want them to be well balanced. So I'm going to be a little strategic about where I'm placing the ghosts, but really just focusing on making sure that the ghosts are well balanced and placed around the tumbler. Now that I got all the little ghosty babes on here, this is what it looks like. And now you'll be ready for your next step. So this next step is a little step I always do when I'm doing a peekaboo. This step ensures that I'm going to pull up the vinyl where I'm supposed to. So I go in with a hot glue gun outlining the vinyl so I know exactly where that vinyl is. Let's just say if you were to paint over this because you needed a base coat and then you cover it with glitter, you might not see where that vinyl is. So by doing this with the hot glue, it's raised up so it's revealing exactly where that vinyl is, and you know exactly where to pull the vinyl up. After you've applied all the hot glue to all your little ghosty babes, allow that hot glue to dry, and then you'll be ready for this next step. We're going to be mixing up some more epoxy for another glitter application. This time you will only need about 5 ml of epoxy. We won't need to do a thick layer like we did last time. After you've mixed up your epoxy, you can apply it to your tumbler. Make sure you concentrate on getting the epoxy smoothed out well over your vinyl. When we remove our vinyl later, we want crisp lines. We'll talk about those crisp lines a little bit more, but make sure you're getting that thin layer of epoxy over your tumbler and covering the entire surface. Using 3 different shades of pink glitters to make my own custom glitter color. I'm looking for a pale baby pink color to go along with our Pastel Halloween theme. I'm using 2 pink and purple monkey glitters and 1 Misc glitter. Pink and purple monkey glitters are Rare Pearl and Rose Peony, and Misc is Barbie Girl. I mixed them up to get this just the shade of pink I'm looking for. You can see on this tumbler, it's just a very light, pale, baby pink color we're going for. I'm going to sprinkle the glitter over my tumbler now, making sure the tumbler is extremely covered. I'm even going to pat the glitter down where the ghosts are, just to make sure that this is really getting covered. I want to ensure that when we remove this vinyl, that we're going to have crisp, clean edges. So I'm just going in with the glitter layer after layer, just making sure that I'm getting it completely covered until I am happy with it. Once the tumbler is completely covered, I'm gonna allow it to sit and finish curing. I'm using Counterculture's medium viscosity, so I've allowed my tumbler to sit for about 2.5 to 3 hours. That's given me long enough for my epoxy to thicken up, but not cure all the way for it to be rock hard. I still need to be able to remove the vinyl, so I want it to be thick, but I don't want it to be cured all the way. I'm going to be using an X-Acto knife and some of CCDIY's tweezers. I'm going to be just removing the vinyl. I'm going to start where the hot glue is and kind of make a slit through the hot glue and through the vinyl, and then I carefully start to pull up the vinyl. I'm very careful when doing this. I don't want to make any mistakes going around the edge of this, so that when we remove all the vinyl, we can clearly see that this is a ghost. After you've removed all that vinyl, go ahead and place your tumbler on a drying rack or back on the turner and allow it to finish curing. I'm going to go ahead and speed us up a little bit now so that we can move along to our next step. But wait till you see how cute these little ghosts are. After your tumbler has finished curing, you may want to seal your glitter using Counterculture's Quick Coat, or you could use some clear spray paint. There may be some loose glitter on the tumbler still, so this will just help ensure that when we go to use our epoxy and apply the epoxy, rubbing it on, we don't rub any loose glitter into our little white ghosts. So after you have sealed your glitter, you're ready for another flood coat of epoxy. You need to get your tumbler completely smooth like we did before. When I say flood coat, I mean I'm using a thicker amount of epoxy to cover my tumbler. So I use around about 30 mLs. I might not use all of that, but you do want to make sure that it's thick. Not thick where it's like running and dripping off of your tumbler, but pretty thick coat. So that's like kind of like my definition of a flood coat. That's not everybody's definition. That's just kind of what I see in my head and makes sense to me. So when I say I'm using a flood coat, I'm really just applying a very thick layer of epoxy. After you've spread your epoxy over your entire surface of your tumbler, go back in and pop any of the bubbles that may have rose to the top. This is an important step always when working with epoxy. You need to pop any bubbles. After you have done that, you can allow your tumbler to finish spinning on your turner until it's all the way cured. I'm going to be cutting up all my little ghosty babes into individual pieces so that they're easier to apply to my tumbler. And I'm just going to be using some dollar store contact paper to transfer my vinyl onto my tumbler. Nothing fancy, just some dollar store good old contact paper. I'm lining up all my vinyl outlines so that there are no gaps in between the pink glitter and the black vinyl. When you were pulling up the ghost vinyl pieces before, your little ghost faces may have not turned out on every ghost, which is totally fine because we were just glittering the faces, so we had a marker. So the glitter faces marked where we were going to lay our black vinyl down. So when you apply your face, just apply it right over top of that pink glitter face. And if there is no pink glitter face, don't worry, just lay it down wherever you think is right. So I'm just going around and outlining all my little ghosty babes here, and I am really happy with how this is turning out. We were going for that Pastel Halloween vibe, and I think she is rocking it with that style so far. After you've outlined all of your ghosty babes and given them their faces, we're going to add a little bit more bling to this tumbler. I felt like it just needed a little bit something else. And what's not a better idea than adding some holographic stars to her? Because our ghosty babes are flying around in the night with the stars, and I think the stars goes perfect with our Pastel Halloween vibe we're going for. I'm just going to be using a few different sizes of stars, and I'm just going to fill in some of that empty space in between our little ghosts. So I'm using Mod Podge to apply my stars to my tumbler. So I'm just going to use a little dab of the Mod Podge, and then I'm going to place my star exactly over top of the little dab of Mod Podge. Mod Podge does dry clear, so don't worry if some of the Mod Podge is showing around the star. It will dry clear. When I'm applying the stars, I'm thinking about balance again. I want to make sure everything looks balanced. Adding too many stars can take this tumbler looking cheap and tacky real quick. So pay attention to the overall balance of the entire tumbler. All right, now we got all of our stars on here and we get a really good look at what this tumbler is going to look like when it is completely finished. What do y'all think? I am obsessed with this little thing. Look at it, our little ghosty babes flying around in the night with their stars. Adorable. Now that we have finished our stars, we're going to seal our entire tumbler with a layer of quick coat. I'm going to let the stars dry for about 20 minutes before I do this, just to allow that Mod Podge to finish drying so that when we add our layer of quick coat and we start brushing this quick coat on, none of those stars move. Again, I'm using one of these awesome paintbrushes from Counterculture, guys. This paintbrush is like legit heaven. Adding this layer of quick coat is going to help ensure that our vinyl doesn't raise up under our epoxy. We all know how annoying that is, but ever since I started sealing my vinyl with quick coat, I haven't had to deal with that. So I'm just going in and brushing on the quick coat over the entire tumbler, making sure the entire surface is covered. After I get this totally covered, what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this aside and allow it to dry. When you're using quick coat and doing this top layer to seal your vinyl, please, 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 even if you're doing glitter, anytime that you're using quick coat, please, 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 please make sure that you allow it to dry fully before you go in with that layer of epoxy. So I'm going to just set this aside to allow it to dry, and while we're waiting for it to dry, we can go ahead and mix up our epoxy for our top coat layer. Mix up another 25 to 30 mLs of epoxy to add your top clear coat to your tumbler. If you do a flood coat like I'm planning on doing, this could potentially be your last layer of epoxy. If you don't get a totally smooth tumbler surface, you will need to add another layer. After our Ghosty Babes tumbler is finished curing, guys, she's done. And how adorable did she turn out? Now you can see her, she's all finished, and I am so obsessed with how she turned out. I am so ready for spooky season now. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you had fun, learned, and was inspired. Please subscribe so you don't miss any videos, and if you have questions, drop them in the comments. Again, y'all, thank you so much. Your support means the world to me. And remember to always have fun when you're creating, because you're creating magic. Thanks again, y'all, and I'll see you real soon.